Long before it became the center of international conflicts, before governments outlawed it, before addiction crises and global drug trafficking made headlines, the opium poppy was simply a flower. Its delicate petals danced in the wind, painting fields with shades of crimson, purple, pink, and white. To ancient farmers, it was another remarkable gift from nature. Its seeds were used in food, its blossoms were admired for their beauty, and hidden inside its green seed pod was a milky white sap that would eventually change the course of human history. Few plants have shaped civilization as profoundly as the opium poppy. Gold financed kingdoms, spices inspired exploration, tea transformed trade, oil powered the modern world. But the opium poppy did something different. It influenced medicine, fueled empires, enriched merchants, weakened nations, and ultimately sparked wars whose effects are still felt today. The story of this flower isn't simply about drugs, it's about power. It's about trade. And it's about how one natural plant became one of history's most controversial commodities. The origins of the opium poppy stretch so far into the past that historians cannot identify exactly when humans first discovered its remarkable properties. Archaeological evidence suggests that wild relatives of the plant were growing around the Mediterranean thousands of years before written history even began. Early farming communities likely collected poppy seeds as food. The tiny seeds were rich in nutrients, easy to harvest, and could be stored for long periods. At first, the flower may have been valued mainly as another useful crop. But at some point, someone made an extraordinary discovery. If the green seed pod was carefully scored with a sharp blade before it matured, a sticky white liquid slowly emerged. After drying, that sap turned into a brown resin. This resin possessed powerful effects unlike almost anything else found in nature. It could reduce pain, it could calm anxiety, it could induce sleep. In larger amounts, it could produce intense feelings of euphoria. Ancient people had no understanding of chemistry or neuroscience. They simply observed results. For communities constantly facing injury, childbirth, infections, and diseases without modern medicine, such a discovery must have seemed almost miraculous. The earliest evidence of humans using opium dates back more than 5,000 years. Archaeologists studying ancient burial sites in Europe discovered poppy remains associated with human settlements dating to the Neolithic period. Whether these people fully understood the plant's narcotic properties remains uncertain. But by the Bronze Age, there is little doubt that knowledge of the flower had spread across multiple civilizations. Trade routes carried far more than metals and pottery. They carried seeds, ideas, medicinal practices. As merchants traveled between villages and kingdoms, the poppy traveled with them. One civilization that embraced the flower early was the Sumerians of Mesopotamia. Although historians continue debating exactly how extensively they cultivated opium, ancient texts describe a plant sometimes translated as the joy plant. Many researchers believe this referred to the opium poppy. Whether that interpretation is entirely accurate remains uncertain, but there is little disagreement that Mesopotamian societies recognized the plant's medicinal value. From Mesopotamia, knowledge continued spreading. Egypt became one of the earliest great centers of opium cultivation. Along the fertile banks of the Nile, farmers grew poppies in carefully managed fields. Egyptian physicians documented hundreds of medicinal remedies. Among these records is one of history's oldest medical texts, known today as the Ebers Papyrus. Written more than 3,500 years ago, it describes treatments using poppy preparations to relieve pain, calm restlessness, and even quiet crying children. To modern readers, this sounds alarming, but ancient medicine operated in a completely different world. There were no antibiotics, no anesthesia, no surgical painkillers. Doctors relied entirely on plants, minerals, and observation. When a natural substance consistently relieved suffering, it became enormously valuable. For the Egyptians, opium represented one of nature's most effective medicines. Its importance only grew as civilizations became increasingly connected. Across the Mediterranean, another culture developed its own relationship with the flower. The ancient Greeks admired the poppy not only for its practical uses, but also for its symbolism. They associated it with sleep, dreams, fertility, and renewal. Statues of Demeter, the goddess of agriculture and harvest, often depicted her holding ears of wheat alongside poppies. The symbolism made perfect sense. Both represented abundance. One nourished the body, the other eased pain. Greek physicians gradually incorporated opium into medical practice. Perhaps the most famous among them was Hippocrates. Often called the father of Western medicine, Hippocrates emphasized careful observation rather than superstition. He recognized that opium possessed genuine therapeutic value. Used carefully, it could help patients suffering from severe pain and sleeplessness. Although medical knowledge remained limited by modern standards, these physicians understood an important principle. Powerful medicines required careful handling. This balance between healing and harm would define opium's history for thousands of years. The Romans later inherited much of Greek medical knowledge. As their empire expanded across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, so too did the cultivation of poppies. Roman physicians prescribed preparations containing opium for numerous illnesses. Merchants transported both seeds and processed resin throughout the empire. The flower became another valuable commodity, moving along increasingly sophisticated trade networks. Yet perhaps the greatest expansion of opium occurred much farther east. Following the rise of Islamic civilization, trade routes connected vast regions stretching from Spain across North Africa, the Middle East, Persia, Central Asia, and into India. Scholars translated Greek medical texts into Arabic, while adding their own observations. Physicians such as Al-Razi contributed significantly to medical knowledge, refining treatments that included opium for pain management. These medical traditions traveled alongside merchants. Caravans crossing deserts carried silk, spices, precious stones, manuscripts, and medicinal plants. The Silk Road wasn't a single road. It was an enormous network linking civilizations separated by thousands of miles. Ideas flowed in every direction. Among those ideas was the medicinal use of the poppy. India eventually adopted opium into several medical traditions. Exactly when remains debated among historians. Some believe Alexander the Great's campaigns helped introduce knowledge of the plant centuries earlier. Others argue Arab traders played the larger role during the early medieval period. Regardless of the precise route, India soon became one of the world's major cultivation centers. Its climate proved highly suitable. Its agricultural expertise allowed production to expand. For centuries, opium remained primarily a medicinal substance. It certainly possessed intoxicating properties, but widespread recreational use had not yet become its defining characteristic. That would begin changing elsewhere. China first encountered opium through international trade during the Tang dynasty. Arab merchants introduced the substance as commerce flourished across Asia. Initially, Chinese physicians valued it much as earlier civilizations had. Small quantities were prescribed for digestive disorders, pain, and persistent coughing. Within traditional medicine, it occupied a limited but respected place. For several centuries, this balance remained relatively stable. Then another global commodity arrived: tobacco. Introduced during the 16th and 17th centuries through expanding maritime trade, tobacco rapidly spread across Asia. Before long, people discovered that tobacco and opium could be smoked together. This transformed consumption dramatically. Smoking delivered effects more quickly than swallowing medicinal preparations. The experience became increasingly recreational. Demand began growing. Government officials soon noticed worrying changes. Addiction appeared more frequently. Productivity declined among some users. Social concerns mounted. Chinese authorities attempted restrictions. Imperial edicts prohibited certain forms of opium consumption. Later, cultivation and importation also faced bans. Yet, despite repeated efforts, demand continued increasing. Markets have always possessed remarkable resilience. When legal supply disappears while demand remains, illegal trade often expands instead. Merchants understood this reality well. Across Asia, commercial opportunities multiplied. Among those paying particularly close attention was one organization that would eventually reshape global history: the British East India Company. Originally established as a trading enterprise, the company gradually evolved into something much larger. It maintained private armies, collected taxes, administered territories, negotiated treaties. By the 18th century, it controlled enormous areas of India, including Bengal, one of the world's most productive agricultural regions. Among the crops cultivated there was the opium poppy. At first glance, this seemed like ordinary commerce: grow a valuable crop, sell it abroad, earn profit. But global economics soon complicated everything. Britain desperately wanted Chinese tea. British consumers had become passionate tea drinkers. Imports soared every year. The problem was that China had little interest in buying British-manufactured goods. Silver flowed steadily out of Britain to pay for tea. This created a massive trade imbalance. British officials searched urgently for a solution. What product could China be persuaded to purchase in enormous quantities? The answer, unfortunately, was already becoming clear: opium. The flower that had served ancient healers for thousands of years was about to become the centerpiece of one of history's most controversial trading systems. Merchants saw enormous profits. Governments saw strategic advantages. Millions of ordinary people would soon experience devastating consequences. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape not only China, but the balance of power across Asia and beyond. In Part 2, we'll follow the opium trade as it grows into a global business worth fortunes, examine how British merchants flooded China with Indian opium despite official bans, and uncover how one determined Chinese official challenged an empire, setting in motion the events that would lead to the First Opium War. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Had you ever realized that the story of the opium poppy began as a story of medicine rather than war? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this historical journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss Part 2. By the early 19th century, the opium trade had grown far beyond anything ancient physicians could have imagined. What had once been a medicinal substance exchanged in relatively small quantities had become one of the world's most profitable commodities. Every year, millions of pounds of opium crossed the seas, fortunes were built, governments collected enormous revenues, merchants competed fiercely for control of supply routes. Yet behind the staggering profits lay a growing human tragedy. Nowhere was this more visible than in China. For centuries, China had been one of the richest civilizations on Earth. Its silk, porcelain, tea, and fine craftsmanship attracted merchants from every corner of the world. European countries eagerly purchased Chinese goods, but China had little interest in buying European products in return. This created a serious problem for Britain. British consumers had developed an enormous appetite for Chinese tea. By the late 18th century, tea had become part of everyday life across Britain. Families drank it daily, businesses served it constantly, and demand continued growing year after year. But every shipment required payment. Since China accepted very few British goods, silver flowed steadily from Britain into Chinese markets. Economists today would describe this as a severe trade imbalance. British officials searched desperately for a solution. They needed something China would buy in massive quantities. The answer already existed. It was growing in British-controlled India. Following its expanding control over Bengal and surrounding regions, the British East India Company established an extensive system of opium cultivation. Farmers were encouraged, and often pressured, to grow poppies instead of other crops. The company carefully supervised production. After the flowers bloomed, workers made small cuts into the green seed pods. Milky latex slowly seeped from the wounds. Once dried, it was scraped away by hand. This sticky brown material became raw opium. It was then processed into large cakes, packed into chests, and prepared for shipment. Every stage was organized with remarkable efficiency. The East India Company didn't simply purchase opium, it controlled nearly the entire production process. The quality was inspected, auctions were held, licensed merchants bought the shipments. Specialized trading vessels transported the cargo across the Indian Ocean toward China. On paper, the British government claimed it wasn't directly selling opium inside China. Instead, private merchants handled distribution. In reality, everyone understood how the system worked. Official policies created the supply, independent traders delivered the product, Chinese smugglers handled local distribution, the profits flowed through every level. Chinese law prohibited importing opium, but enforcing that law across thousands of miles of coastline proved nearly impossible. Fast-sailing boats slipped into hidden coves during the night. Cargoes changed hands offshore. Local merchants carried the drug inland. Corrupt officials accepted bribes. Smuggling networks expanded rapidly. The illegal market became astonishingly successful. As prices rose, more merchants joined the trade. Soon, enormous quantities of opium entered China every year, despite repeated government bans. For many users, what began as occasional consumption gradually became dependence. Historical estimates vary, But by the 1830s, millions of Chinese people regularly consumed opium. Not everyone became addicted. Many used it occasionally. Others remained moderate users throughout their lives. Yet addiction grew increasingly common, creating widespread concern among government officials. Families watched loved ones spend fortunes supporting their habits. Businesses reported declining productivity among workers. Silver, which had once flowed into China through trade, now began flowing outward to pay foreign merchants. The very imbalance Britain had struggled with was now reversing. Chinese officials recognized the danger. Some argued that the solution was stricter enforcement against users. Others believed the true problem lay with foreign suppliers. One man emerged as the strongest advocate for confronting the trade directly. His name was Lin Zexu. Today, Lin is remembered as one of the most important officials in modern Chinese history. Known for his honesty and determination, he believed corruption and addiction threatened the stability of the entire empire. When Emperor Daoguang appointed him as imperial commissioner in 1839, Lin received extraordinary authority. His mission was simple: end the opium trade. Upon arriving in Canton, now known as Guangzhou, Lin acted immediately. He ordered Chinese dealers arrested. He pressured local merchants. He demanded complete cooperation from foreign traders. Most importantly, he surrounded the foreign trading district and refused to allow business to continue until every chest of opium had been surrendered. The standoff lasted for weeks. British merchants resisted. Their cargo represented enormous wealth. Many feared financial ruin if forced to surrender it. Eventually, under growing pressure, British officials agreed to hand over the opium. Nearly 3 million pounds of the drug were confiscated. Rather than selling it or storing it, Lin ordered its complete destruction. Workers mixed the opium with lime and salt water before dumping it into specially prepared trenches near the sea. The process continued for weeks. One of the largest drug seizures in history disappeared into the earth. To Lin, this was a moral victory. He believed he had protected millions of people from addiction. To Britain, however, the destruction looked entirely different. British merchants demanded compensation. Government leaders argued that Chinese authorities had destroyed valuable private property. Economic interests quickly became matters of national pride. Diplomatic tensions escalated. But Lin didn't stop there. He wrote an extraordinary public letter addressed directly to Queen Victoria. His argument was straightforward. If Britain considered opium dangerous enough to restrict among its own people, why was it acceptable to export it to China? He appealed to morality, fairness, and mutual respect. History suggests Queen Victoria probably never read the letter. Even if she had, events were already moving toward conflict. In London, influential politicians and commercial interests viewed China's actions as unacceptable interference with international trade. Military intervention became increasingly likely. The British Empire possessed one of the world's most advanced navies. China possessed vast manpower but comparatively outdated military technology. When war finally broke out in 1839, the imbalance became painfully obvious. British steam-powered warships carried modern artillery capable of striking Chinese defenses from long distances. Chinese coastal forts relied largely on older weapons. Many soldiers had never encountered industrial-age naval warfare. Battle after battle demonstrated the widening technological gap between East and West. British forces captured key ports. Chinese defenses struggled to respond. The conflict became known as the First Opium War. Despite its name, the war involved much more than a single commodity. It represented competing ideas about trade, sovereignty, diplomacy, and imperial power. Yet opium remained at the center of every disagreement. By 1842, China's military position had become unsustainable. The Qing government agreed to negotiate. The resulting Treaty of Nanking marked one of the most significant turning points in Chinese history. China paid a large financial indemnity. Several important ports were open to foreign trade. British citizens received expanded commercial rights. Most famously, Hong Kong Island was ceded to Britain. The treaty also marked the beginning of what many Chinese historians describe as the Century of Humiliation, a period during which foreign powers steadily expanded their influence inside China. Yet, remarkably, the treaty did not solve the opium problem. Trade continued, demand remained high. Smuggling expanded once again. Only a little more than a decade later, tensions erupted for a second time. The Second Opium War began in 1856. This time, Britain was joined by France. Once again, superior industrial weapons gave European forces overwhelming advantages. The conflict ended with even greater concessions from China. Additional ports opened, foreign influence increased, restrictions on trade weakened further. By the end of the 19th century, the consequences reached far beyond economics. China's weakened government struggled to resist growing foreign pressure. Internal rebellions intensified. Political instability spread. Many historians see the Opium Wars as one of the major events that transformed East Asia and reshaped global politics. Ironically, the flower itself never changed. The poppy remained exactly what it had always been. Its biology was the same. Its petals remained just as beautiful. Its seeds still produced food. Its latex still relieved pain. What changed was the system surrounding it. Commerce transformed medicine into mass trade. Profit encouraged expansion. Competition escalated into conflict. A single flowering plant became entangled with imperial ambition, international diplomacy, and global economics. The story of the opium poppy reminds us that history is rarely shaped by objects alone. It is shaped by the choices people make about those objects. In Part 3, we'll explore how scientists isolated morphine and codeine from opium, how these discoveries revolutionized medicine, how heroin was originally introduced as a medical treatment, and why the legacy of the opium poppy continues to influence healthcare, law enforcement, and international politics even today. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your perspective. Do you think the Opium Wars were primarily about protecting trade, expanding an empire, or controlling a valuable commodity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of history's most influential plants, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the final chapter. The legacy of the opium poppy did not end with the Opium Wars. In many ways, it was only the beginning of a new chapter. During the 19th century, scientists began isolating the plant's active compounds. In 1804, German pharmacist Friedrich Serturner successfully extracted morphine, a substance far more potent than raw opium. A few decades later, French chemists isolated codeine, another compound that proved highly effective for treating pain and suppressing coughs. These discoveries transformed modern medicine, allowing doctors to provide more precise and reliable treatments than ever before. However, every medical breakthrough brought new challenges. In 1898, the German pharmaceutical company Bayer introduced heroin as a medicine, believing it to be a safer alternative to morphine. At first, it was praised by many doctors, but it soon became clear that heroin was highly addictive, leading governments around the world to impose strict controls and eventually ban its medical use in many countries. Throughout the 20th century, nations introduced increasingly stronger drug regulations while continuing to rely on carefully controlled opium production for legitimate medical purposes. Today, medications derived from the opium poppy remain essential for surgery, cancer treatment, and severe pain management, even as illegal trafficking continues to create serious social and political challenges across the globe. The story of the opium poppy reminds us that nature itself is rarely good or evil. A single flower can ease suffering in the hands of a physician, yet cause immense harm when driven by greed, conflict, or misuse. Its history is ultimately not just the story of a plant, but a story of human choices, ambition, science, commerce, and responsibility. If you found this journey through history interesting, let us know in the comments below. What surprised you the most about the opium poppy's influence on the world? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the remarkable stories behind history's most influential discoveries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.